This one is called Solo Leveling is Just Mindless Action Slop the Anime. And if I think about that take, it's not... I mean, can we really say that this is like the deepest writing art that we've ever seen? Is this the type of anime that the anime man would go and glaze this for the next 20 years? No, right? I think that we should be very honest with this and say that, hey, like, Solo Leveling is a very action-focused anime. It does have some interesting plots regarding the player, the system, what Jinmu is, and what the gates might be, the mysteries, but I don't think it's like the deepest writing that I've ever seen, right? But at the same time, is it just mindless Unga Bunga action? And when I think about Unga Bunga action, mindless brain slop anime, I kind of think Demon Slayer, right? I mean, that's kind of also unfair because Demon Slayer does have its own little story. It's not the most complex, deep shit ever, right? It's not the craziest written story that you've ever, experienced, but there is a simple enough story to go off of.
People often say that Solo Leveling is hard carried by action and animation and art, and
it is.
And it's just basically a shonen slot fest of action. And that's truly unfortunate, because I feel like there's just so much depth, parallels, and character acting on display, especially...
Is it really? Hold up. Okay, well, let him cook for sure, but like, hold up. When we think Solo Leveling, we're thinking aura farming. We're thinking cool designs, insane stakes, Sung Jin-woo being in situations where he's about to clutch and save everyone, and then the power fantasy for us to be like, wow. And it's all flashy and it's all fun, right? It's all fun, right? Is this like 86 though? A1 Pictures did 86 as well, right? I think they did. Now, 86 is one of those shows where, if Chibi led in with this, I'd be like, you know what? True. I think that 86 is overglazed, but at the very least, the symbolisms, the parallels, the deep commentary about war and discrimination and prejudice and, stuff like that. Yeah, it's present. What about in Solo Leveling, though? Like, what about in Solo Leveling is that level of deepness, though?
In the anime adaptation for Solo Leveling that really just goes unnoticed, or at the very least, not talked about as often as it should.
Let's talk about it.
Let's get right into that one.
Let's talk about it.
On the positive side of the community, usually when you see discussions of Solo Leveling, to be fair, it's usually only about the art, animation, and action. I mean...
Yeah, because let's be brutally honest. Solo Leveling is all about the action, the art, the animation, right? Even like the webtoon, it goes crazy because of the fantastic art that it has. Now, maybe like when I think about Solo Leveling and some of the deep themes that it might be trying to tackle is like the loss of like humanity. As Jinwoo, slowly becomes more engulfed into the system as he continues to kill and take lives, and maybe he's going to lose his humanity. And maybe there's some interesting, I don't know, stories that we could have with that, and most likely Cha Hae-in will show up and, give him a hug from behind before he turns too edgy and saves him. That's kind of the cliche stuff like that. But what other insane depth of story exists in Solo Leveling to kind of like say this is not just action?
Most of the conversation around this episode is literally about this action sequence where the characters are fighting the High Orcs. And to be fair, it's a really good segment. Like, this entire segment is beautiful. The story...
Shoutouts to SAO, Ordinal Scale Team, right? The SAO movie team showed up for this and they delivered. You could see a lot of parallels with, the SAO sword movement that you see in the movie and the anime compared to the most recent episode.
Boarding and everything done here, you can feel the passion from the animators when they were working on this. This is a good scene. It's legitimately amazing, and it makes a lot of sense why everybody talks about it when it comes to Solo Leveling. So in the negative side of things, obviously people are quick to basically say that it is just an action cardboard cutout slot fest, because that's all they ever see. That's only the positives and praises they ever see from the community of Solo Leveling and what they talk about, which...
Yeah, because having a video essay talking about the loss of humanity of Sung Jin-woo is not going to get any clicks or engagement. If we're talking about advertisement and promos and what people see in an anime for, right, they just want to highlight the hype shit. This is what gets the engagement. People want to see the aura farm. People want to see these super action hype stuff. So you could have this very biased viewpoint from the tourists that think that Solo Leveling indeed is just, just action. Yeah, that's fair.
which I feel is just so disingenuous and inaccurate because there's so much more on display with this series besides just that. So today, before I really dive headfirst into this action sequence and really talk about it, I really want to give some in-depth analysis and discussion to Jinwoo as a character.
Jinwoo! Sung Jinwoo! Why can't he not say woo? Ooh. Boo. Woo. Why is it whoa every time? That's the thing I don't get.
But also what this episode did for the story, because I feel like there needs to be some justice done for Solo Leveling. I've just been seeing it a lot, and it makes me honestly upset. It's tragic. It's a tragedy just seeing not many people really mention this in their discussion videos of Solo Leveling. So let's get right into it first thing. We have this segment at the beginning of the episode where Jinwoo is joining the mining team once again. He's offered another job, and he goes back to the site the next morning, and everybody looks at him and is like, you know, oh, we're happy to have you, man. Like, thank you for joining us and stuff. Like, they're greeting him with smiles.
So, like, him getting a little flashback of the Double Dungeon episode, and the reminder of that, and to see the growth. Okay, is that the deepest writing you've seen, though? I mean, the take right now is that this isn't just mindless action slop. So Jinwoo having a reflection of what he used to be in the past and what he is now. The parallels there. For sure, this is extra elements beyond just the Unga Bunga action. But is this the pinnacle of writing? I don't think that this suddenly makes this like just the most story-driven story ever.
Smiles on their faces, and this entire segment basically showcases what Jinwoo no longer has, what he used to have, but no longer has. And the reason for that is because a lot has changed. He has become a lot stronger. People have died. He has been betrayed by people. There's just so much has happened. He has taken lives. And he can no longer go back to what he once was, for obvious reasons. And we have seen the gradual descent of his personality, or his humanity, better way to apply to him. His descent of humanity, and how he no longer feels as attached to his humanity as he once did, which...
Now, absolutely, right? I even mentioned this part about, like, what deep part of Solo Leveling really is there to talk about beyond the action and the hype? Because I still think that Solo Leveling is like 80% hype and aura farming and maybe 20% of this like deep story. I don't think the story's that deep though, is it? If we're going to think from a theory crafting perspective, yeah, the difference of how Jinwoo is categorized as a non-human, as like a player by the system, and how Cha-Hae-in can smell him is different, how Barca commented about how the voices don't tell him to kill him, that's pretty interesting. There's some theory crafting there. There's also some hints that like Jinwoo could be the final boss of the show because as the father, Song Il-won, said, you know, it doesn't matter how much hunters you have. They'll simply be all devoured and be used against you, against that dialogue against Hwang Dong-soo. And that kind of implies that, hey, shit, Jinwoo has that exact power. Is Jinwoo going to become the ultimate, you know, end boss of this show at the end of the day? I don't know. There's some complexities there for sure. But are we really going to state that Jinwoo seeing this little reflection here and like him like losing his humanity because he's killed so many people, 3 people so far, which doesn't even get mentioned that much, honestly. It's like a very brief mention in his brain. Like if we really look at the percentages of the episodes and how much it really tries to handle that part of the storytelling, it's very minor. And I know I can acknowledge that exists, but holy shit, is this like fucking Violet Evergarden? Is this Vinland Saga? Is this quote-unquote 86? I don't think so, right? Like, for sure, these elements exist, but to say that, like, these story points, and that's not what Chibi is saying. He's not saying that these complexities in the storytelling is bigger and a bigger importance in Solo Leveling. Absolutely not. I think that it's like an 80-20 split, where 80% of the hype is fucking action, right? 80% of the story is just fucking aura farming and action, and 20% is more of kind of like his whole, like, I don't know, perspective of how he used to be the weakest, but now he's pretty strong. How people used to backstab him and betray him, and now he's going off to kill people and he's losing his humanity. But like, I don't know. Like, where are we going with this?
Makes sense, all things considered. Let's look at what has been revealed in just the last few episodes alone. I mean, Jinwoo, even if he wants to return back to a normal life, it's going to be impossible. He is going to be in the next day an S rank. And obviously, giving the title of an S rank, you know, Hunter, that is a prestigious title to have. And everybody around the world's going to be talking about that, so he will never have a normal life ever again. Regardless, if he wanted to, he will always be the talk of the town. People discuss him. He will always be used as a resource, so to speak, to be able to rein people in throughout the world, but also different dungeons as well. It makes a lot of sense. Just that alone already detaches him from the normal person, and even the normal hunter, because S-rank hunters are already in a class in of themselves amongst other hunters, and when you're in an S-class rank, you already might as well be viewed as like a demigod, so to speak, because nobody else really can compare to you. So, already in that alone, his attachment to reality is already starting to wane. But then, you get into the fact that he is someone that is able to continuously increase in power. He is getting stronger as the story progresses, and everything from what we know so far, and this isn't spoilers, it's just common sense, there is no upper limit to his strength. We have seen it that it doesn't seem to appear to be a level cap. There seems to be like no limit to what he can learn and what abilities he can achieve. So theoretically, he keeps fighting in dungeons, killing bosses, gaining equipment and stuff. Eventually, he's going to become so strong that even the S classes are going to look like E classes to him. They're not going to even be able to challenge him. They will look like literal bugs on the wall in comparison to him. And you got to factor this in, what I already talked about. In S-Class, you're already basically in a league of your own. You're already viewed as something, as a monster. And so
everything he's talking about so far, I fail to see how this is supposed to add depth to the story. Like, we can talk about the power scaling all we want. But I think that to kind of like play defense for Chibi, this kind of adds on to that loss of humanity where, you know that saying, money and power changes people? Jinmu is changing, and now because, you know, he is killing people, he has the loss of humanity there. There's also him growing so powerful that he will now see people as ants, and at a certain level, maybe he will never be a relatable person. He'll be so detached from anything that is human. That is the whole, like, story-driven narrative of him just losing humanity. I think that's the entire point that you're talking about.
Imagine someone that becomes so powerful that an S-class looks like an E-class to them. Jinwo's attachment to humanity will eventually stretch beyond limits. And that is definitely something that is being presented within the story very gradually and subtly. It's not...
And again, you even say yourself, very gradually and subtly. The anime has not tackled these themes in a way that highlights it to the degree that you place this story on a pedestal. So to the common anime watcher, the common viewer of this, there's nothing to talk about really so far. The seeds are simply planted, and maybe later on, season 3, season 4, beyond, right? It'll blossom, and we'll be definitely tackling more of the psychological components of Jinmu and what this system does to him and the people around him. And for sure at that point, I will absolutely acknowledge that, hey, this show is not just, mindless action slop. In fact, even now, I don't acknowledge that this is just mindless action slop. I have talked about how there is the loss of humanity, even like his home perspective of being the weakest, and now he's going to be the strongest. Even the stuff with mom, right? The really sensitive topics of how he's always looking after his mom and everything is bad, and all his goals right now is to like tackle that shit and get the ingredients, get the the elixir, right? There's all these different things beyond the power scaling and the aura farming that exist. But still, I present it like an 80-20 split, where 80% is this action aura farming and 20% is the more sensitive storytelling aspect. And do you then blame the audience on Twitter, the monkeys, that just sees a clip of Jinmu just fucking shit up and saying, this is great, this is, hype? And I don't really know the tweets, right? If Chibi could present the tweets and say, like, hey, are we fighting a ghost right now? That's what I want to know. Because sometimes people will just create shit and we'll for the sake of making a video, and we'll just create ghosts in our head. We'll just start shadowboxing it. But who said this? I want to see the tweets.
Not fully pushed in your face, but it has definitely been there ever since he took his first life back in season 1.
Yep.
And it has continuously been a thing that's been there, showing that he doesn't have as many connections as he once did, or at the very least, he's not actively trying to forge as many connections as he did. He tries to keep at a distance. He doesn't try to let people die, but at the very least, you know, he doesn't really want to make as many friends as he possibly can, because obviously he has been betrayed. And he even mentions that within this episode as well, which I'll segue into in a moment. The point of the matter is that Jinwo is increasingly getting stronger, and eventually, you know, it's going to be a subconscious thing to where he's not going to look at, like, probably some humans the same way as other humans, because of just how powerful he has become.
He'll see them as ants.
It's pretty sad. At the very least, the way the story is being depicted and how it's presenting him as a character, that's what it looks like. And so there is some level of depth to his character, besides him just obviously...
Yeah, some level, though. That's the thing. There's a spectrum. It exists, but does it exist on the same scale as Vinland Saga Season 1? Hell no, right? Hell no. Well, like Solo Leveling does not address these topics. We are really reaching and stretching right now and doing a very, very... What's the word? We're glazing this part of the story, which is objectively just not a big portion of the story. It exists, but not to the degree that it is so important. So yes, like, yeah, I acknowledge it, but this is not a deep story.
Obviously, I gotta get stronger. I am Solo Leveling. I summon the shadows. You know, all stuff like that. You know, there's a lot more to him than just the obvious stuff that you see within the series. So like I said, I feel like there's such a disservice to not just him as a character, but the series, because of the glorious character acting that is on display that is very, very subtle. And since I just mentioned it, let's talk about his betrayal and how...
Is it subtle, like Re:Zero foreshadowing? Or is it subtle, like, this is not the most important part in the story of Solo Leveling, but we'll still have it in the story? You know what I'm saying? Listen, I love Solo Leveling, bro. I farm this shit like crazy. And even I can acknowledge that this is still, most of the times, mindless action slop. Is it entirely? No. But like, this is not even close to the pinnacle of writing that I've seen. I watch this shit because it's hype. And that's it. It's super hype. It's an aura farming anime. It gets the stakes really up. You're anticipating hype every time. And the story-driven part, the world-building stuff, I really appreciate it too. But I can also acknowledge that this is not the center point of the story, at least right now. Maybe later on, again, the seeds will blossom and we'll really delve into the inner the psyches of Sung Jin-woo and how he views humanity and other living beings. Are they the same thing? Do the value of a life of a human being start to not matter at all? Will he then start killing people and arise and, you know, basically take over the world? Now, if that shit starts happening, I'll concede. But right now in the anime, that's not the case, right?
How Jinwo was reminded of how he was betrayed in the past. We get this whole segment here at the end of the episode where the whole team that was leading Jinwo into here, he was basically carrying their equipment, they are willing to put their life on the line and die for him to try to get him out. And obviously, this comes across as like your typical cliche of heroes and stuff doing good things, but we gotta look at what the world has presented thus far within the story of Solo Leveling. To this very point, everyone that has been around Jinwo, to some degree, has been very selfish. You've had party leaders and major power players that have basically been very selfish. They focused on their own survival. They focused on their small members, and they were willing to throw their E ranks or C ranks, D ranks, whatever, to the wolves to be basically devoured and destroyed. Hell, let's look at, you know, the dungeon break, or not the dungeon break, the red dungeon we had a previous episode ago. Basically, when you factor that in, we have seen this time and time again, to where, you know, people usually in these powerful positions, they abuse that power and they, you know, take advantage of others to some degree. And so Jinwo has been someone that has obviously faced persecution, someone that has been pushed to the side because he was labeled as weak. He's also someone that has been basically used as a decoy, so to speak.
That's right. He's been in both spectrums.
All this in, him seeing a party that is actually trying to do the right thing is pretty much a shocker to him, because usually it's a survival.
Yeah, they're usually all just assholes trying to backstab and trying to, you know, basically just save themselves, right? For the first time, we actually have an elite party with some good morals and ethics, and it really challenges Jinwoo's like perspective of, damn, These people aren't bad at all. You know what? I'm gonna save you.
Fittest and that's it, and then, the weak die, so to speak. But them willing to die for him showcases not just the character of these individuals, but also the guild itself that is being able to cultivate these individuals. It showcases they got this far because of teamwork and good nature and goodwill, instead of trying to push people aside.
I'd argue they got this far because they're A rank. Listen, I think we're making a mountain out of a mole right now. We're really fucking stretching the tiniest little things to really argue that this show is more than just aura farming. I think that the reason that this party is this good is because they're fucking A ranks, bro. And because they're A ranks, they have a lot more leniency. They have a lot more freedom. Rather than a bunch of shitty fucking C ranks and D ranks and E ranks trying to fucking, fight for valuable resources and survive, you have a lot more freedom. Everyone is pretty competent. This kind of environment and structure then creates a nice, culture where everyone's kind of looking out for each other. We've never had a party of this caliber before. That's why I think they're this good. Not necessarily because it's not the morals and ethics of that's why it's they're good. The morals and ethics I think exist because they're A rank.
To be able to achieve power. And I think one of the big indications of this actually was in the middle of the episode. Before the High Orcs were obviously introduced, one of the big things, or actually it was after the High Orcs were introduced, correction, my bad. We had a decision from the captain where...
Yeah, comparing a party of adults and a party of middle school is pretty good, well put, right? Like all the different shit, and again, the guilds that, that this party is from too, very reputable, right? It's just a completely different situation where you have very competent, very well-respected people that has a work culture that just is perfect versus previous guilds and parties, which are just a bunch of fucking scammers, a bunch of fucking thugs.
Where he could have chose to stay to keep going forward. And obviously, they still were forced to go forward within the dungeon, but the actual character acting here and what he decided to do really showed who he was as a person.
What if the ethics is what made them A rank? Just go look at Hwang Dong-soo. You think people give a fuck? You think the system cares about what you awaken into? Doesn't matter what kind of person you are. Shitty people can be powerful too. None of that shit matters.
And why he even got this role in the first place. He decided that they would return. Like, for instance, they would go back and leave the dungeon because obviously it seemed way too dangerous. And if this was anything to go on, we have seen previous captains and stuff get head over heels with their own power and strength and other teammates. They thought they could take the entire dungeon regardless of the signs that they definitely couldn't. But this captain...
Yeah, this guy's really refreshing. He's like, you know what? Let's not run it down mid. Let's not double down. Let's just go back home. We don't have to do this shit. And then the magic guy was like, nope, you're staying here.
An individual felt like it wasn't safe.
This guy is like the exact opposite of Kim Cho. This guy cares about his party. He doesn't sacrifice other people. He'd rather sacrifice himself than others. He's always thinking about the perspective of his party. For sure, he's great.
Wanted to back out. And I think that shows a lot to his character. It showcases that he is someone you can look upon and be like, I'm glad he's a leader. At the very least, he's trying to care about people besides his own achievements. And obviously, he does want to achieve something. And I think the episode does try to paint that. It tries to showcase that he does want to have a successful dungeon because he will get promoted potentially and look better in the guild. But obviously, backing out could hurt his chances. But it is a good reflection on a leader to know when something cannot be done. So I love this little scene. It adds a lot more depth to the characters as well, and shows that they're not just cardboard cutouts. The world is lived in, and there is progress and...
That is the cool part, right? I think that these characters are not just random characters that just exist to look pretty. Right? Even the one in the glasses that we're showing right now, she showed up in season 1, man. She was like in Shaheen's plane. I remember seeing her, and she even made comments about how you really think that we're that stupid that magic users wouldn't know how to use stealth, or wouldn't be able to detect stealth. It's nice to see that a lot of these characters have more depth than just random NPCs that are just sometimes just copy pasted CG asset backgrounds that we often see in isekai shows where they just add nothing but to occupy space.
Stuff, and it's not just Jin Wo progressing as well. But one thing though I will say is that this episode does a really good job with little scenes like that. I mean, we have some really gradual stuff set up throughout the episode. I mean, we have this whole smelling scene, which comes off as comedic as well. But obviously, what we found out from her is that hunters smell awful to her. We don't know necessarily why, but obviously Jinwo doesn't. And it's probably because he's a player, which he even talked about this episode. So it comes to make you wonder what's going on there. Why does all the other hunters smell to her, but he doesn't? But, yeah, I mean, like I said, there's a lot more going on with this episode besides what people normally talk about. Action.
But those things that we're talking about, again, we are stretching such a minor part of the story into something that's way bigger than it actually is to illustrate a point that solo leveling is not just mindless action slop. And I agree, it's not mindless action slop, but let's also be very objectively true here. It's heavily action slop, though. Like, all this shit that we're talking about, yeah, I mean, these are random plot points that we can talk about. Some of them are pretty interesting in how it could, relate to, like, again, Jim with psychology and how he could view other people as less than humans. But are we really going to sit here and say solo leveling isn't the same level of writing like 86? Even Attack on Titan. I think Attack on Titan is incredibly fucking deep. And here's the thing. Attack on Titan didn't get that deep until, like, what? Season 3-ish and beyond, right? Because the first season and a half or a bit, the secrets are all there. You don't see it first time watching, but you could easily dismiss it as just brainless action slop. And a lot of people had that same opinion, myself included, until I started to watch more and the secrets started to come out and I'm like, oh my god. At what degree did the author plan ahead to have all these foreshadowings to happen? If the same thing happens in solo leveling, for sure, I'll concede. But right now in the anime, do you blame the casual fans to think that this is just mindless action slop? In fact, everything Chibi did just now, I could do the same thing for Demon Slayer. And I would know that it is the most dishonest way of representing Demon Slayer, right? Like, come on. Come on, man.
And stuff, and like I said, I feel like it's just completely a disservice to what the series has to offer. Now, with all of that being said, let's actually get into the action and animation, because obviously there's a lot of good here. This episode is legitimately amazing looking. I love what it looks like, and I love getting to see this vast teamwork from them. Like, look at this. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Seeing a human character beat the absolute crap out of a monster to some degree, a big monster, will never get old to me.
Rigged. Fraudulent. Nah. These orcs got fucking robbed, bro. They had it down. They were winning. Then Jinmu pulled up and did the most scammy shit possible, bro. And then these dumbass hunters start to get, shots in. Rigged. I know, I don't buy it. Justice for the orcs.
I absolutely love it when you just see someone go hands-on brawling with fist or whatever, and they beat the absolute crap out of a monster.
A lot of Tommy fan service for her.
It's so cool. I like that in video games and stuff, and, seeing, like, some of this action we got in the episode, it's everything I like. It's like something I would like from a video game or any action sequence. It just, it felt very good. There was definitely a lot of liberties taken with these sections that, expanded upon the original content from the webcomic. And once again, this shows the passion of the team. They really do love solo leveling. And
remember, this is not the most priority episode, but it was kind of getting up there. Had a lot of the staff, the team that worked on SAO Ordinal Scale. And if you've seen that movie, like, god damn, bro. Like, that's why the quality was there. In the next episode, though, I think it's going to be the actual priority episode of the season. The team that's going to be working on next episode, bro, it's going to be crazy.
A1 Pictures, they're really cooking. They are really, really cooking for this show. They are trying their absolute best. Now, one thing I want to say is at the end of the episode, we get this whole hallway scene. And
the hallway scene was so well done, bro. The level of depth and immersion that the camera work, portrayed. Like, as you enter the gates, and the CG background too, I think fantastic. The soundtrack too really set the stage at the boss theme, boss room, and like all the different orcs, the absolute sheer scale of this room and the way that they presented it, like, bro, that was peak cinema.
I think this does a lot to really build up.
Like, even the fucking boss dungeon room is aura farming. What the fuck? Dude, this is Aura Farm the anime where the boss dungeon room is Aura farming.
Obviously the next episode, but also the hierarchy of this dungeon. Obviously what we've seen in the middle of this episode, the high orcs are very powerful. They're no joke. Obviously Jinwo was able to deal with them pretty easily. He didn't even use his shadows, but it's clear they're very powerful. They're able to take monsters from C-rank dungeons, make them basically servants and like guard dogs, so to speak. You can see that the way the orcs are lined up and all that with the hierarchy and the different equipment on, that there is clear indication that these orcs on the side are a lot more powerful than the orcs they were fighting in the dungeon.
I'd argue that these orcs are the same as the one that we just fought in the dungeon. And the 4 dudes that had different designs and armors and specific weapons that is represented side by side with the guy sitting down are like the stronger orcs.
Entrance of the dungeon, so to speak. But then when you see the actual leader in the front when he is introduced, you can just see like his ornaments, like the way he is dressed up and everything. You can see that this is a man that has fought a lot. This is a man that has gotten a lot of achievements. He is
I mean, shit, his necklace has a bunch of skulls, bro. Probably all his enemies.
Respected by his underlings, he's incredibly powerful, and he is well spoken. And I think this shows a lot, because up to this very point within soul leveling, besides obviously the else we saw in the previous episodes,
they can't talk. Monsters can't talk language. This guy can. And Baraka talking to Jinmu was in different language that like Jin and the rest of the group could not understand. This dude phased through one of his warriors. And the rest of the humans heard that language. They spoke the human language.
The enemies, they don't speak. They don't. And we're now starting to encounter more enemies that just straight up are able to speak to the hunters. And it shows that as the story progresses, that means that the entities are going to become more intelligent. It's not going to be just mindless monsters fighting. It's going to be enemies that are...
I want some ants to start fucking talking, bro. They already grew wings. Why can't they start talking?
Actually able to speak their opponents and probably learn and fight against them. So Jinwo himself is eventually going to encounter stuff like that to where it will be harder than what he ever expected. So I like that stuff. But
yeah.
The question you have to run into now is what's going to happen next? Obviously, this is...
What's going to happen next? I think it's so obvious. It's so obvious, right? Everyone's going to get fucked up by the orcs. Jinwoo will simply wait until he needs to save the day. Then he will say erect and everyone will fucking lose it. And the aura farming will be crazy. That's gotta be the strategy, right? The formula is have everyone else struggle. It's like the One Punch Man formula. It's like the Emness and Shadow formula. It's not fun when the strong guy that you know is gonna win is going to take care of everything. There's no stakes, there's no threats. But if you have good side supporting characters, if you have everyone else that is struggling and you can see through their perspective of how hard it is, then suddenly you get way more immersed. And then he shows up at the very end. The hero shows up at the very end and boom, power fantasy or farming, everyone's gonna lose it and it's gonna be a happy ending.
The boss of the dungeon. If he is defeated, that basically means it's GG and the dungeon will close. But the thing,
and we gotta arise in every one of them. This guy too, every one of them, we need to erect.
Thing is that will Jinwo sit around and watch them all die?
I don't think he'll watch them die, because he said that I think he would step in before someone actually dies. Maybe there'll be some casualties, but I feel like he'll like, I don't know. I'm just a bag boy. I gotta hide my identity. I'm just a chill bag boy. And once everyone has taken enough damages and had like passed out, I guess, or became like, you know, unconscious, then he acts.
Or will he step in? There's a lot of things that can happen.
And you know what the most fucked up thing is? We let the A ranks all die and arise them. I mean, listen, that's how my content brain works. If I'm thinking from a very objective way of how to increase my own power, let them die. Dude, we could have a bunch of irons, man. You saw how many of those fucking A-rank hunters are there. Alright, let them die. Or shit, I'll help the orcs. I'll kill them for you. Arise. And then I'll kill the orcs too. And then arise. Bro, it's so easy.
Here, it's going to be a test to his character. It'll showcase like his development as well, and also his attachment to humanity, whatever decision he comes up with.
Oh boy, what is this? The worst ending in history of manga gets a season 3. I kind of want to watch this, considering Oshinoko has some crazy fucking drama at the end, right? Thank you, El Drago, for the 7-month tier 1. I appreciate that, buddy.
In the upcoming episode, but whatever happens, it's going to be glorious.
Yeah.
So I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you so much.
And no hate to Chibi. Absolutely no hate to Chibi. No disrespect. But I feel like we're doing a little bit of shadow boxing. And for sure, there's probably some random tweets online that says that solo leveling is mindless slop. And I think they're wrong. And I agree with Chibi that solo leveling is not just unga boonga, zero brain, action. But here's the thing. You can say that about any show that seems like unga boonga, action, right? Even including Demon Slayer, you can always try to stretch minor points of the story and try to really portray the psychological aspects of how different characters are viewing different things. Absolutely, Sung Jin Woo is, having this interesting phenomenon where, because he's now killing and because he's seen both sides of the spectrum of being the weakest and also growing strong, he's going to be able to see people in a different light than other people may. And that's a very interesting plot point, right? And stuff like this, for sure, can blossom into deep writing points in the future. But the anime so far, I fail to see how this is the pinnacle of writing. And the argument is not that Solo Leveling is the pinnacle of writing. But I also, again, just don't blame people for thinking that this is mindless action slop, because 80% of Solo Leveling, and this is just an arbitrary number, it's just a random ballpark figure I'm pulling out. Is it really 80%? I don't know, but I feel like it's 80% aura farming and just action hype, which is exactly what Solo Leveling is about, and 20% of these deeper themes that are just being planted right now as seeds. And who knows if they will blossom into something really deep and profound as the story goes on. Please go check the video out. Here's a link to Chibi's channel. Go give him some support if you want to. I'll see you guys next time.